So I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome Mark Grave. Mark is the Chief Executive Officer of AWEX, the Australian Wool Exchange, and is based in Sydney. So Mark has been the CEO of AWEX for the past 19 years and has been actively involved in the development of AWEX programs. These include NWD and its integrity program, eBale, which is your RFID and QR code embedded wool packs, Wool Clip, which is the on-farm capture of wool data with some software and traceability with that, wool classing standards, market reporting and information, AWEX and ID. So lots to cover with that. So great opportunity to take advantage of having Mark here today. So I hope you enjoy his presentation. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Michelle. And Josh, wherever you are, thank you very much for leading in. You saved me a lot of work. Firstly, appreciate the opportunity of being here. It's the first time that we, as the Australian Wool Exchange, have been up in this part of the world, and it's been way too long. I was sitting next to Jodie 10 months ago, and I thought I just said hello and was introducing myself, and the next thing I know, I'm here. I'm really pleased that I am, and then I got the agenda of what I was supposed to speak about, and I thought, God, this is going to be boring, and it's going to be hard. So I've decided to twist it a little bit and talk about traceability and technology, because that's what this is an expo about, how it relates to wool, but more importantly, how it relates to the market. So a little bit about ourselves. For those that don't know us, we've been in the wool industry now for 30 years. This is actually our 30th year. We do a lot of the stuff behind the scenes. So we do a lot with standards. Wool classes, if there are any in the audience, would know of us. They register with us. We have a standard of preparation. We have standards for a whole host of things, including the wool packs, which we'll talk about. That's fundamental to what we're calling eBale. We have our market reporting, which we're the national market reporter, so anything about the market comes from us. We have other things, including eBale, which I said, Wool Clip, which is John Cox, who's here as well today, and John's got a stand directly straight through out in the marquee, and we want to talk to you about it and anything you want to know about it, so happy to do that. And Sustainable, which in itself is a certified integrity scheme. So we work from farm, in fact, before the farm when we're talking about wool packs. We work through the supply chain here domestically, but we're also well known overseas for the integrity of what we bring to the market. No use having standards unless there's compliance. It's one of those dirty words, but you've got to make sure that your information can be trusted so that you can get the best bang for buck. You can get the best competition you can on your wool. And they expect, they being the industry and particularly the exporters and processors of the world, expect us to make sure that the information that they're receiving, that they get transmitted or it's at the auction, if it's sold by auction, they can trust and therefore they can bid with confidence. That's, in a nutshell, what our role is. So from today, and I'd expect this, and this is my challenge to you, is that you should be asking any of the exhibitors here, myself, Josh, 3 questions. What, how, and why? What are we actually talking about? How are we going to do what we're going to do? But the real key question is why? And that you can actually apply to most business decisions, and your business people, business decisions that you have. So in my context here today, we're talking about information. How do we get credible information that the world can trust? That's what we've built our reputation as an industry of over the last 200 years. They trust what we do. We've got mature systems that have been around for a very long time, so they are trusted. So that's important. And the information that we're trying to provide is actually coming from our customers. It's what they want. It's not what we want to tell them all the time. Sometimes it is. But it's what they want because they have their customers that they need to satisfy, and it goes on and on. So the supply chain starts at the farm gate. It's a crude term, but it starts at the farm gate and travels through. How do we do it? Well, today we're leveraging technology, and that will continue. It will always evolve. You can never rest on your laurels because you know that there's something new and shiny just around the corner. So you have to be aware of what's around you. And technology is going to help and does help us do so much more, so much quicker, and so much better. It was only, 3.5 years ago or thereabouts before COVID became a thing. We didn't know what a QR code was. And now and it was almost something that we said, oh, I don't need to be involved in it. But it's got so many applications that we can use, and it's very practical. So more and more, and particularly the more remote you are, the more savvy you are about technology. And that's the way this industry is growing. So why are we doing it? I had an 11th hour question from Jody last night at about 9 o'clock. But part of it is quite seriously about market access. Should anything happen in the industry, we want to make sure that we are still accessible to the whole world who want to buy and be competitive for our wool. We know that last year we talked about FMD and the scare that was in Indonesia. It was right on our doorsteps. There is nothing more devastating than having a biosecurity risk, because it shuts down an industry immediately. Any industry. It's not just wool, it's not just meat, it's all agricultural industries, because we have to really ascertain what the problem is, where it is, isolate it, and how do we progress from there. And as I was reminded last night, there are AUSVET plans in place for every agricultural sector, and you should make yourself aware of those. What happens, who's in control, where the decisions get made, how does that all happen? What technology does is help speed that up. It's no longer, throw your arms in the air and we're out of the game for 5, 10 years. It will be an extended period, but if we can allocate, isolate and quarantine, we can actually help get our market access back again. We saw this recently in South Africa. They had foot and mouth, had nothing to do with their ruminants and their sheep and their livestock. It actually was in their the wildlife that they had in the north, I think it was in the northwest part of South Africa. But straight away, China just said, no, we're not buying any product. We're not having any product shipped to us. And so the brokers went through this whole ordeal of actually having to insulate their warehouses and heating to extraordinary temperatures to try and kill any virus. But the whole point was to give confidence to the Chinese that their product was safe and they could prove it. So we don't want any of that, but should that event ever occur, we want to be able to act very quickly, and technology will help that. And a lot of technology is solutions-based. And by that I mean that we can create a lot of efficiencies. And Josh was talking about duplicate numbers. Nothing truer. We see that all the time in wool. Duplicate bale numbers, errors that bale numbers have been missed. And it happens so often. The key to that is if you handle the information once, the risk of error reduces significantly. We talked briefly, or it was mentioned briefly, about the National Wool Declaration. It's been around for a while. It was very sensitive when it came in because it spoke about mulesing, but really it's about providing good information to our buyers who need to know and want to know. It's been around in all sorts of forms, but now it can be done electronically. And the important part from that is that electronic software is always up to date. It has the latest version of something, or there's an update that will and anyone who has a smartphone, and most people do in Australia, they'll get updates all the time, and that's just to keep them current with whatever technology or issues that their software provider might have. We've all seen the old classes, species that are sitting on the desk at home or in the footwell of the ute or somewhere obscure, and we still see them come into stores. And a lot of the documentation's just not relevant anymore because the industry has moved on. So there's a real benefit in doing that. And this is a typical of a paper-based specification. Up here on the right-hand side, another piece of information that's becoming even more important, and that's the PIC. So property identification. So traceability, you can start to see elements of traceability come in even through the paper-based documents. When you're talking declaration rates, South Australia has actually been fantastic. It is a higher declaration rate than Victoria and New South Wales. It's always been up there in terms of with the leading states. And if you look at and I'll point again, but this line here, the ND, those that haven't declared, it's still running at around about 27% nationally, largely driven by what's happening in WA, but I'll add a little bit of fuel to the fire. We don't like to use premiums and discounts. We call them market signals because it's a little bit more, premiums and discounts sort of give you ideas about what should be and you may not reach. The pricing you see up here, and I know it's very difficult to read down the back, so I apologise for that. The first three sections are about non-mules, cease mules, or mules with pain relief. They don't call it pain relief anymore, but you understand what I mean. That's how the price relates to a declared mulesed mob or mulesed lot. So they're all basically in the positive. They're receiving more money than a declared mules mob. But I draw your attention to that bottom section here about not declared. So those that are not declared are actually being discounted. They're receiving less than those that actually declare that they have mules. So my challenge is, why the hell wouldn't you declare? Whatever it is that you do, it's better than not declaring, because the result, even in the crossbred section, which there wouldn't be that many crossbreds up in this neck of the world, I imagine, they receive a discount compared to those that actually mules and declare it. So declaration rates are important. This is a voluntary scheme. To have 72 to 75% of the industry declaring is actually a really strong message. We often get calls for making things mandatory, but nobody likes too many things being made mandatory. So having something that's market-led, and you can see a market signal that actually supports that, is a really positive message for the industry. So on the counter side to that, AWEX often gets, we've done something like just on 400 mulesing certificates, where an exporter will come to us and they say, my client wants to know or to verify this batch of wool and the mulesing status that you have. And we do that. And batches can be anywhere up to, from 1 or 2 bales up to 500, 600, 700 bales. And and if they're not compatible, the exporter will go back to the broker and cancel that sale. Unless they have another order that they can put them into, they cancel the sale and replace it or just go without. So the information you're providing on farm, the declaration that you make, actually has weight and value, and the exporters use that because that's part of what they purchase, and they have to on-sell it to their client and so on down the supply chain. So it's a really important linkage. I'm going to move on quickly because, as I said, the topics I were given were many. Certified integrity schemes, I don't know if you're aware of them or if you've heard of them. Basically, these are the opportunities for growers to display and champion all the good things that you do on farm. Pastoral zones are very different to high intensive zones. We know that the landscape around Australia is very, very varied. There are a number of these certified integrity schemes. Ours, and I'll declare it now, is sustainable on the right-hand side. But their aim is really looking at different things that you do on property, from animal welfare, whether your animals are, in this case sheep, fed, sheltered and watered, looking at the environment, how you treat the environment. And these are credentials that actually help sell the product. Product from you, product that the exporter has bought for his client overseas or her client overseas, and their clients further down the supply chain. So whatever you declare and the practices that you do here on terra firma actually have repercussions and important influence over the supply chain. And you're going to hear more and more about it because it's becoming a very important question. Remember that question, why? Why would you do it? Well, this is a report that we run at the end of a week, a sale week, so normal auction sale week. Again, in the very light grey column here, this is the Eastern Market, or MPGs, micron price guides, for each particular micron. Now, I know the focus here is on this finer edge because in a display like this, it actually has the bigger amount of money, and the bigger amount of money is always attractive. So when the market was positive, in the grey, the certified integrity schemes for the same type of wool were even more positive. So there is a market incentive to head down this road, even if it's with mules with pain relief. That's really the starting position for anybody that's in a certified integrity scheme. So there is real incentive to be involved in these things, or at least consider them. And don't think it's not for you. Don't think I must be non-mules, because we know that practically in industry, there are whole different production systems for a whole different range of reasons. And we heard about, how often do I actually have to bring my sheep in because I don't want to bring my sheep in because I can't, and the cost of doing it. So the idea is to champion what you do, not try and conform you to one particular set of rules. And next onto the technology, I'm getting there, so you didn't think I would. In my hot little hand here, and I'll get Jody, if I can ask you, there's 10 in there, and if you can just distribute them. We're talking about e-bale here, and this is similar to what Josh was talking about with EID, but this is for wool. We know that any one bale of wool might have 20 or 30 odd fleeces or more in a particular bale. But how do we actually introduce electronic ID for wool, and how is it actually to be released? We started on this back in the late 1990s. So the overnight sensation, I keep saying, has taken 25 plus years to get to. The concept is that each wool pack will have an electronic label, which you've got being passed around, and John has examples of that over in the marquee. And that can be recorded by using the WoolClip app. Now, the WoolClip app works from a smartphone. It links it, you upload it automatically to a website. That transition's very easy, and I'll take you through that, or John can certainly take it through you in detail. The whole concept here was that we wanted to have both a QR code and an RFID. We didn't want the RFID, well, we felt it was a burden on growers to actually use an RFID on farm and have another device, where most people actually have the smartphone. So you can record the QR code, which has exactly the same number, which is a 23-digit number. We've got a check digit in there, and I think we worked it out, it's going to last us for at least 500 plus years, given the volume of wool that we produce. You can attach that and attach it to, using WoolClip, you can attach it to your classing record or your shearing. So bale 1, 2, 3, whatever, can be attached to bale 4 of 3 a.m. And that's how it will travel through the supply chain. It's important that the bale label was chosen because we had a consistent point of having the technology. And the technology is different, the RFID is different to what you see in the EID, which is often a common and a good question. We use ultra high frequency, and that's because of wool contains moisture. So we need it to work not just in a single bale, but where it's tri-packed, where it will have, coming from different zones, there'll be different levels of moisture, and still be able to be read in that condensed tri-pack. So different technology. We actually looked at what was being used in livestock, and it didn't work for wool, and the moisture was the big part, but also the life cycle of the wool pack is a pretty harsh one. John reminded me that he ripped off a label we actually have. This is the reverse side. So what you're looking at here is what is actually hidden behind that label on the screen. That dot right there, that's the chip. It's about the size of a ballpoint pen. It used to be in our first, back in the 90s, was about as big as my small fingernail. It was made up with coils, looked like an electrical circuit. Snap a coil, you killed the RFID. It was as thick, or thicker actually, than a credit card, so it wasn't flexible. And you'll see from what's going around now, they're actually quite flexible because bales aren't always pressed the same way. So, and the plate, the rest of it is, where are we? There we are. The rest of it is actually just the antenna. So I said we had coils originally back in the 90s, now it's just a plate. So technology has continued to evolve. And this is what we call a passive tag. I'm not sure, Josh, if EID in livestock's a passive tag. where you don't have a battery. In other words, there's no end life to it. You just have to have something that can read the RFID. But on farm, we use the QR code because it's easier, it's more reliable in terms of the technology that you'll have on the class or the presser, whoever will actually have on themselves, and it will help improve a lot of efficiency through the supply chain. Which brings us to wool clip, and I'm really scooting through this, so I apologise to John, who's looking at me in disgust and saying, you meant to spend more time on this, that and the other. Wool clip has been around now for about 7 years in total. This year, this season, we've produced or recorded just over 100,000 bales. So far, we'll get close to 150 come the end of the season. Year to date, we're around, if we went from March to March, we're around about 130. So it's actually gaining popularity. Popularity for 2 reasons. It's intuitive, so it's not hard to use. Growers can use it. They can register the farm account and away they go. Classes use it, pressers use it, and the brokers can stay in touch with their clients and know where their shearing is up to. But that control is always with the grower, and that's important. The access rights you get to actually look at what your clip is doing is the control of the grower. So it is a software, it's an app and web. It will upload anywhere at any time, but you can use it when you're offline. There's no use having a technology that only works if you're in the middle of the city somewhere where you can actually get Wi-Fi. You actually have to be able to use it in a shearing shed. And so it's important that that works that way. The next statement is really important because this is a really powerful tool for you as a grower. Industries everywhere want the single source of truth. Single source of truth doesn't come from the broker, doesn't come from AWEX, it doesn't come from somebody down the supply chain. It comes from where the information's originated. So the single source of truth for wool is the wool shed. That's where the classer or whoever is creating the bale, that's where they know what goes into that particular bale. That's what they sign off on. We know that there's a classer. We have a farm account that's been verified by the broker. We have the information of what happens at shearing in that really confined and intense area called the wool shed. So if we can record that information there, it doesn't have to be entered when it hits the broker. It doesn't have to be touched again by a buyer if they're intending to buy that wool. It only is handled once. So the risk of an error, the risk of duplication, the risk of losing or missing information is almost eliminated. And they're important. And Josh touched on the fact that EID will reduce error rates. This is exactly the same. So we know that there's always on the paper specie, and the brokers tell us this all the time about how much is missing information there is. There's a declaration that hasn't been signed. There's duplicate bales. We need to know more because the specie wasn't filled out correctly, or there wasn't enough detail so that they can act on it. And what happens? Often that wool might miss a sale. You wanted it sold this week, it might have to wait to a following week. Or it might just be put in store until we get the proper information, but the broker. So this actually helps alleviate that. Remember when I said part of technology is about solutions-based? We're finding a solution to a problem. And the industry is telling us that this has been a big problem that requires resources and therefore is costly to the industry and to you. This is a home page of when you open up Wool Clip, it tells you immediately who you are, what you are, and these are the jobs, the last time you shore, if it's your property. And we work on this screen, again, you probably can't see it well enough down the back, but it actually is working from left to right. And this is the way that wool growers and wool classes and wool sheds work. You start up with what the job is, where are you? And then you look at who's in the team. So you can add the classer, the grower, the broker if that's the person you want to add in, and presser and so on. And then we start with the mobs. What mobs are going to be coming into the shed? And this is no different to what you would do normally. And then we start you can do the NWD, you could do it before the start of old habit, the start of shearing, because you actually know what, as a wool grower or the manager of the property, you know what mobs are being shorn. And then you start adding the wool book, and so you're adding bales and so forth until you complete a specie. And the good thing about the specie is it can be as simple as just clicking a button and it automatically generates the specie for you. No need to go looking at your wool book and writing it down, oh, put that in the wrong line, I need to change it. It knows all that information and the software does it for you. And that saves an amazing amount of time, but it also gets that information to the broker before the wool actually arrives at the store. So they know exactly what's coming in, they know what they've got to do, and they can set up accordingly. I don't know that I see too many wool pressers wearing a hat, but this guy is doing exactly what I just said. He is recording, he's scanning the barcode, he is entering the details, bale 22 or whatever it is, 3 AM, etc., bale weight, and he has just entered it onto wool clip, and that's it. So when you hear about extra work, it's different, absolutely. It's not the same as writing it on a piece of paper and putting it back on the bench, but it's a permanent record because it actually saved in the software, and as I said, when you're in range, it's automatically uploaded into the cloud, which is secure. Must be secure. So it is secure, I can assure you. So as I said, we've had concern that, well, this is going to take a long time. It's extra work I have to do. But it's actually just not the case. It's different, yes. Do you have to learn something to do something differently? Absolutely. But you can complete all the documentation. And if you're a grower and you're nowhere near the shed, you're in town for the day or you've had to head to Adelaide, you can actually complete it. If you haven't done it beforehand, you can complete it while you're in Adelaide. You send a text and it logs you in and you can check the details and sign off. So this is what the screenshots look like. And you can see that it consistently just has a bale number, the description of it, 3 AM, how many kilograms in it and so forth. This is nothing different to what a classer would expect to see or expect to know when they're actually classing a clip. And that's what a specie looks like. I took the liberty of putting the wool clip logo up in the top left-hand corner. Normally what we do is actually put the broker logo up there in colour. But I didn't know how many different brokers would be here today, so I was being a little bit cheeky. But it's very clean, it's very clear, and it's exactly as you know it. And what actually happens is that this is what we call a PDF copy. You could print it out if you wanted to, or you could just save it on file in your own software. But it's also sent to the broker in data form. And now we've built APIs, which is a way of transferring information into their systems. They just download it. So they don't have to do the data entry I was talking about before. They can just suck that information in to them because you've actually designated where that wool's going to go to. It'll go into their account, into their systems on your account, and therefore they can just see that wool coming in as it comes through the door. And if you look at the bottom right hand, you can see the tick down the bottom right hand corner. That's just saying that the NWD has been completed. It's signed and completed. So simple visual, if that's how you work, but I can tell you systems and brokers want the data straight into their system so that they can just proceed and get your wool to market. Scanning on a truck. If it's prepared using wool clip, this guy here can scan on the truck without turning any bale. He knows where each bale has come from, what line it belongs to, because it's linked to the wool clip data. And that's useful when it's going through to be tested. So it's as simple as that. It matches the records together, as which Josh spoke about. If you're going to have the information or the data, you might as well do something with it, and the brokers can do that to make it a much more streamlined and efficient system. When we first started the new technology side of this was probably 5 or 6 years ago now. It's hard to remember. I wanted to know that it worked and how quickly it worked, particularly for a warehouse. Now, this isn't on farm, of course, but for a warehouse, we wanted to demonstrate how effective it can be. So we mocked up a batch of wool that was being delivered. 116 bales had to be recorded, and so we put the tags in behind each of the labels. And this guy here, Mark, he's actually a hardware salesman. So the scanner, which he's got in his hand, is able to read any tag as he runs past it. So what we did was said, well, let's give it a test. And this was actually the first time we did it. And he came back, and what you can see there, he read every one of those tags. But what you can't probably read anywhere is this last column here will tell you how many times he read the tag. It ranges anywhere between 20 and 45 times. So there's a lot of power in the information. There's a lot of power in the technology. And just by simply doing that, he knows already that the batch he wanted, he can match that up with the batch that was ordered, and that's right to go. And it can be placed all throughout warehouses to make it more efficient, logistically efficient for them as well. And finally, which was always the true test of any technology, particularly for wool, and you don't have to do this with sheep, thank God, is that you don't have to try-pack them. We only try-pack to try and maximise the efficiency of a container, get as much wool as we can into a container, which lowers the cost of freight. And I can tell you over COVID, freight rates tripled and more. So in that, each one of those has 3 bales compressed together, and the technology has to be able to stand up, in this case the RFID, to be able to be read within the tri-pack, and it can. And that took a fair bit of testing, so I really appreciate the help we had from the dumps in particular, AWEX in the dump, to help us with that particular project. But it's important. So now we're at a stage where, as an industry, we're looking at the integration of the technology into the warehouse. We're looking at the integration of the wool clip data into the warehouse. And John has one, I didn't bring it with me, John has on his table what is the new e-bale wool pack. So it's got the technology embedded in it. The first batch of those packs will be coming into Australia in about 2 weeks' time, the first week of April. And from the end of June, from the 1st of July, every new wool pack that comes into Australia will have the technology embedded in it. Now, a question that might come will be, well, what's the cost? And that's a good question. The cost of the technology is 60 cents per pack. We went to industry to say, look, quite openly, this is the cost of the technology. This is the benefit we think it can deliver. Do you support it? And they'd been with us on this journey for quite a long time, and everyone, to a person, to an organisation, was more than supportive of it. There are warehouses being set up to use the technology, to use the RFID. I think it's going to be a very competitive landscape where brokers will be competing based on the technology and how they set up an efficient store in the future. So from the 1st of July, they will be the only pack, not from the 1st of July, they'll be the only pack imported from 1st of July, and progressively through this year, they'll become the only pack that is available to buy. You can still use your old pack. There's no problem with that. There's no deadline on using the old pack, but they will be flushed through the system naturally, just as we've done with any other change that we've made over the last 20 years, when nylon came in and when we changed the bottom of the bale to be 4 seams. That's naturally progressed through the system. That will happen. And we have a transition where we can actually have these tags where you can apply if you want to try the technology out, and John can speak to you about that a little bit later on. So you can actually apply the tag. It's exactly the same. It's got an RFID on the back, it's a QR code on the front, and you apply it to the label. So there's a lot happening in this space. There's still a lot to happen in this space, but the aim here is to improve the information flow, improve efficiencies for everyone. It's not a one-way street here. There's got to be benefits flowing back to the grower, and the information flow back to the grower, I think, is underutilised. and it will be something that you'll see a lot more about. So when you see a pack which is the same colour, the blue template, it'll have the 2 QR codes on it. They will be the new packs that, as you understand them, what I've just explained now, and you'll see a lot more of them coming in from certainly from the 1st of July. I think I'm open to a question. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. That's certainly a lot of information for everyone to take on board. Really exciting stuff, I think, for sheep industry when we're looking at an era of needing better traceability and everything across all our markets. So great for us for market assurance. But is there any questions for Mark?
Sectors of it be improved upon for carbon credits would be one thing, and also for advertising overseas for product, from paddock to product.
Yep.
And I know what you're doing is very intellectually right up there. It's like a university trying to get something done, but they just don't get that next step of marketing it overseas. And I draw your attention to Anlaby Station, which is near Kapunda, and they have done their own little bit in marketing their blankets, which have a Morris frieze to it as well, and they don't go through the carbonising process. So on everybody's new Rolls Royce, they get a new overthrow from Anlaby Station. And the way it's marketed has been not only in South Australia, but through a couple of guys in Sydney as well. So everybody's can get together, they can make it work well, but is there space on the QR codes as one progresses in life?
Great question. Thank you very much. Just out of interest, and I'll come back to it in a moment, did anyone try and scan the QR code? Curiosity didn't kill the cat. If you scan the QR code that you've got with you at the minute, or even when you're outside, what it actually shows you is a unique number. Now, the unique number in this case is only useful when it's attached to something. So there's no capacity on the QR code. There's a minimal capacity on the RFID, but not a lot to talk about, to actually add the details, from lazy Y over X, bale number 3. There isn't that ability in the QR code itself. So on this particular cycle, this particular QR code was built for efficiencies in logistics, really built for that matter. So it's limited in that sense. What you're talking about is marketing and how it might be, sometimes I think you can scan a QR code and it'll take you to a YouTube video. Yeah. Not in this particular one. One of the concerns growers have always had with anyone providing QR code is giving information away to people that shouldn't actually have it. So not on this one is the answer, because this is really about logistic efficiency, information flow. The marketing side of it's not our bag. Sorry, that's not a real technical term, but it's not our go-to. But I'm sure that other organisations who are marketers, and I'd assume also an AWI for that matter, would be exploring what's possible with an additional QR code. It won't be using that one, but it will be additional because it will be linked to exactly what you are saying. It's an interesting challenge. And it's the first time anyone's called me intellectual. Carbon neutral.
Won't our properties all have to be carbon neutral within the next 6 to 10 years?
Yep.
Therefore, we will have to have a degree of accountability that your farm is sending stuff off and marketing carbon neutral, because the purchasers internationally won't be accepting it. What might your comments be?
This is where the certified integrity schemes step up. They are looking at that regenerative farming, whether they're carbon neutral, really looking at the credentials of each property. Now, we're a slow burn in the industry. I think that's the nice way of saying it. But we do so many things right that I think what these schemes will do is try and optimize the information and the attributes that you're talking about. I know where you are with what you're saying, but in terms of what we're doing with eBale, that will actually be one of the integrity measures of the information that it says that you're carbon neutral. How do I prove that you're carbon neutral? Well, I can trace it through. And this is QR codes and RFID are not traceability in themselves. They're mechanisms that enable traceability. So you actually have systems over and above that that'll actually want to say, well, I want to know where property X is and are they actually carbon neutral and how do I prove it? So you go through these integrity mazes of proving that your carbon neutrality or whatever the case that your purchaser is looking for. So it's an interesting development that will continue to develop. And a lot of these systems really are looking at, well, what's next on the horizon that we need to be on top of, and it's certainly going to increase in terms of intensity. But it's about the integrity of the information that is actually a really strong attribute, and hopefully the QR code and the RFID actually help enable that. We want to leverage the good things that we do. We have classes, we have standards, we have all sorts of integrity services that are provided to ensure that what we're getting, right back to where I started, what the buyer is buying, they can have confidence in. And one of those attributes in the future and starting will be about carbon.
If I can just add to what Mark's saying, and I think answer the question, so the QR code for the bale registers that bale, not your wool clip, not your carbon status, that sort of thing, but that piece of information with all the other QR codes from all the other bales will allow that information, if you allow it, if you accept, or if you allow your broker to pass that information on through a integrity scheme to an end user, so that potentially someone can scan that garment and say, oh yes, this consignment came from X property, and yes, here's their carbon status, here's all the information that they have agreed to provide. You cannot have the QR code giving your life history to anyone who happens to read it unless you agree to that. So it's a matter of getting that bale information into a system that can read it, so that then other programs down the track can actually put that data together. Whereas at the moment we've got it on a paper specie, which is a nightmare to reproduce without mistakes. So now we've got it on a piece of data which can be transferred as you agree to into whichever scheme or to whichever marketing organisation you want to give it to. So it's really accepting that QR code is for that bale, but it's a piece of data that then can be transmitted. And certainly, as Mark said, AWI is looking at a lot of marketing opportunities that can be used going forward with some of these traceability schemes, because everybody's talking about traceability, provenance, that sort of stuff. But the ownership of the data must remain with the grower until you say, yes, my broker can use it, or Sustainable can do something with it, or Anlaby as a property wants to use the data. So it's really about owning that data, but having it in a form that can be transmitted. Sorry about that, Mark.
Do you just want to explain who you are so that people can catch up with you through the day?
Sure. Andrew Dennis. So I'm here with AWI today, and we're working with WoolQ, or more specifically WoolQ today, and we are just now working with AWEX to combine our electronic species, because a lot of you might be aware there's 2 electronic species out there, and so we've taken the opportunity to combine the best of both, if you like. So going forward, the wool classer will use the wool clip specie, and using the QR code, And then that data, if you want, can be transferred into the wool queue system, so that your provenance, your story, your data management on farm can utilise the wool queue system. So it's as Mark says, the industry moves fairly slowly, but we're getting there. So we've got a really good e-specie out there, getting all the benefits of an electronic specie, and then still behind that, we've got the wool queue system that we can manage that data for your business, and then we can incorporate the traceability certified integrity schemes should you want to do that. So that's my job as wool queue, is to be one step behind the wool clip, I suppose, and allow you to manage that data.
I'll confess up, we're already registered with a certified integrity scheme, which is very brave for the pastoral industry, and we do not mules. My question is, you've got a list, I'm not going to tell you which one we're with. You've got a list along there, other than your own, which I believe is sustainable, correct?
Yes.
How do they rate? Are there some better than others?
Well, firstly, in fairness, Abelusi on the left-hand side is a South African scheme. It belongs to Modiano Seaguard Majorelle, who buy here in Australia, but they use Abelusi in South Africa only. RWS is well known. It's probably the most strongest. It's a 20-year scheme that's been in the marketplace. The others, Cape Wool, South Africa, again, ZQ is South Africa, sorry. ZQ, as they call it, I hate the word Z, but still, is a New Zealand-based scheme. So the ones that are active here in Australia are Authentico, which is driven by G. Schneider, and RWS, which is common amongst a number of brokers for sure, and ourselves. So they're the three. So how do they rate? They're all different. We're very strong on the fact that quality actually matters, whereas for some schemes it doesn't, and I think that's detrimental to the industry. So that's a personal view. It's conflicted, all right? So I'm guilty because I have another badge on my sleeve. But everything we do is about integrity. Everything we do is about wool classing and standards, and we can't drop that, and we won't. So for us, that's a point of difference between some of them, but they often cover very similar points themselves. The differences tend to lie in their reach down the supply chain, if I'm being brutally honest. And we don't have the reach that they do, but yet I could demonstrate, do I say premiums? I can market signals that suggest that ours are similar. In that particular report there, the three schemes that are part of the CIS non-mules are the three that I mentioned: Authentico, RWS and ourselves. They're sustainable. So they're all included in that. I imagine you would be. But thanks for the question.
Yeah. And have this in front of you, because it's one I do get. So we've got the certified integrity schemes, but you also have your non-mule status as well.
Yeah.
So what's the premium difference, or what's the gap between a producer declaring themselves non-mules to actually then
going that extra step?
Extra step to that.
Yeah. If you had have asked me that about 2.5 years ago, I would have said that the difference could be 200, 300, 400 cents a kilogram, quite literally. There was a Riverina clip that was marketed, had special orders in the marketplace, well known at the time, and it got up to 400 cents more, but that was 2.5 odd years ago. There is still, so for that particular scheme and schemes, it's coming back because now there's more and more of them. There is a difference. I can't tell you off the top of my head, but but it also requires additional work. You know, apart from the declaration, there are audits that have to be done. And there's audit fatigue out there from people driving down the driveway, one after the other, having to do an audit for A, B or C, then you might have NLIS, and then you might have something else. And it's already difficult and expensive to get stock in. So we're very mindful of that. And I think that what Andrew did point out is that there's a greater willingness in the industry now to collaborate. That means that ourselves at AWI, we talk and we're friends and we actually do things together. And I actually think there's greater opportunity now to collaborate across industry with the likes of an MLA and with other industries that have similar goals, and let's be more effective and efficient about it. So if ever there was a time that that will happen, should have happened decades ago, but it's likely to happen now because we're seeing it all the time now in wool. And there's more to come with wool, just closer collaboration than what we've seen in the past.